My name is Diana Moore. I'm 35, a senior marketing director for a tech firm in Seattle. And until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had a solid, if not perfect life. My husband Adam died in a car crash on a rainy Thursday night, and I've been moving through grief like someone walking underwater ever since. That Saturday, my best friend Claire convinced me to come to her daughter's birthday party. It was supposed to be light, cheerful, a distraction from the hollow silence that had taken over my house. I remember standing by the snack table, clutching a lukewarm cup of coffee, watching kids shriek with laughter over a unicorn piñata when I saw her. She walked in like she belonged there. Tessa. I didn't know her name then, just that she was tall, with perfect curls and a sharp gaze that scanned the room before locking eyes on me. In her arms was a baby boy, probably around 1 year old, chubby, and dressed in a tiny button-up shirt. Everything went still when she spoke. She didn't raise her voice, but her words sliced through the party noise with surgical precision. He has his father's eyes, don't you think? The room quieted. A few people looked around awkwardly. Someone turned off the music. I blinked, unsure whether I'd misheard her. She stepped closer, shifting the baby on her hip. I'm Tessa, Adam's partner. This is Noah. He's Adam's son. The words landed with a thud in my chest. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Claire's mouth hung open. The kids stopped mid-play, sensing something strange in the air. I didn't move. Couldn't. My feet were rooted to the floor like my body was trying to protect me from what was coming next. She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a folded document. It looked official. She held it out toward me. Adam's will. He updated it when he found out I was pregnant. I didn't take it. I couldn't. My hands were trembling and my vision blurred. It says Noah is entitled to half of your house. Our house, she corrected herself quickly. The one at 248 Maple Ridge. That was my address, my sanctuary. The place I'd shared with Adam for 5 years. She said it so casually, like discussing a furniture order. People were staring at me, waiting for a reaction. Some looked horrified. Others seemed almost entertained, like they were watching a drama unfold in real time. I could hear someone whispering behind me. Someone else stifled a laugh, then quickly looked away. Tessa kept going. I know this is a shock. I didn't want to do this here, but I thought it would be easier with everyone around. For support. She smiled almost gently. Adam wanted his son to be cared for. He trusted you'd understand. I finally looked at the baby. He stared at me with wide, curious eyes. Did he look like Adam? Maybe. But my mind couldn't form a complete thought. My world had just shifted sideways, and I didn't know which way was up. I still hadn't said a word. That silence must have unnerved her because her voice sharpened. We'll need to make some changes. I'd like to move in. Take the master bedroom. Convert your office into a nursery. That's reasonable, right? Something inside me cracked, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I nodded slowly, just once. Then I turned, walked out the front door, and didn't look back. No one followed me, not a single person. All I could think was, what if she was telling the truth? And if she wasn't, then what game was I about to be pulled into? I drove home in silence, the kind of silence that sits heavy on your chest like a weight. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, as if letting go might unravel the last threads of control I had left. The roads blurred past, but all I could see was her face, smug and confident, and that baby on her hip. When I stepped through my front door, the air inside felt colder than usual. I stood in the entryway for a long time before finally unzipping my coat like it weighed 100 pounds. The house was spotless, just as I'd left it. That almost hurt more. Nothing had changed here, and yet everything had. I made myself a cup of tea, not because I wanted it, but because the ritual was grounding. Then I went to the safe in my office and pulled out every piece of documentation I had on the house. Deed, mortgage, closing papers. My name was the only one on every line. I bought this house before I met Adam. I'd paid for every inch of it myself. Still, I checked twice, 3 times. Maybe there was something I'd missed. Maybe Adam had secretly added his name somehow. But there was nothing. No amendments, no co-signatures, no surprise filings. The house was mine. That should have brought comfort. It didn't. Instead, I sank into the armchair by the window and let the steam from the untouched tea swirl upward as my thoughts tangled themselves into knots. Tessa might be lying about the will, but what if she wasn't lying about the baby? What if Adam had really betrayed me? Not just an affair, but a whole other life a child. He had been traveling more toward the end. Said he was under pressure at work. Said he needed space to think. I didn't question it, not really. I was busy with my own deadlines, my own exhaustion. Maybe I'd missed something. Maybe I'd chosen not to see it. The idea of Adam holding another woman raising a child with her while coming home to me like nothing was wrong, it made me feel physically ill. But I also knew him. At least I thought I did. He was kind. Quiet. The sort of man who left me notes in the morning and always folded the laundry without being asked. So why hadn't he told me about her, about the baby, about any of it, unless he didn't know? Unless this wasn't what it looked like at all. I didn't know what was worse, that he might have lied to me, or that I might have loved someone I never really knew. That night I barely slept. I lay in the dark, trying to untangle the pieces of my life from the web Tessa had spun. One part of me wanted to scream to destroy something. The other part wanted to believe there had to be an explanation. Whichever part was right, I knew one thing. I needed to find out the truth. All of it. The next morning I made 2 calls before even getting out of bed. One to Carlos, a private investigator I used years ago when a former client tried to sue my firm. The other to my bank. If Tessa was lying, I needed proof. And if she was telling the truth, I needed to know how deep Adam's secrets went. Carlos agreed to meet me that afternoon. He was sharp-fast and didn't waste time with pleasantries. I gave him everything I had: Adam's phone records, work calendar, even the name of the hotel chain he used most often when traveling. Then I turned my attention to what I could access on my own. Adam and I had kept separate bank accounts. It was practical. We had a shared account for bills, but the rest stayed split. That made tracking him easier than I expected. When I logged into the joint account, I scrolled through every expense from the last year. Rent, groceries, gas, all normal. But there was a monthly withdrawal, same amount, same day, transferred to an account I didn't recognize. It wasn't much, just a few $100s, but consistent. Quiet. Enough to avoid attention. I dug deeper, pulled credit card statements, phone bills, and anything I could download. I created a spreadsheet, something to make me feel in control again. The pattern was there. Gaps in time. Unaccounted charges. Little things that didn't make sense before, but now felt like puzzle pieces I'd ignored. That night, I opened the drawer on Adam's side of the bed. It still smelled faintly of his cologne, something warm and woodsy. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. At the very back, beneath an old paperback and a stack of business cards, I found a phone. Not his usual one. Smaller, cheaper, prepaid. My heart thudded as I turned it on. No password. Just a wallpaper of a mountain range and a few apps. The text messages were the first thing I checked. They were all from one contact. No name, just a number. The first ones were flirty, suggestive. As I read further, the tone changed. Demands, threats. You owe me, you promised. If you don't pay, she'll know everything. There were responses too. From Adam, short, tense replies. This needs to stop. I've given you enough. I can't do this anymore. I sat there staring at the screen, trying to absorb what it meant. Tessa wasn't just a secret lover. She was squeezing him. And he was scared. That's when it shifted for me. The doubt, the anger, it didn't vanish, but it faded just enough for something else to take its place. Clarity. Adam hadn't been planning a second life. He'd been caught in something darker. Maybe he made a mistake. But the woman at that birthday party wasn't a grieving mother. She was a predator, and I was done being blindsided. If Adam had tried to protect me even in the end, then the least I could do was find out what really happened. The next time I saw Tessa was at the office. She was walking out of accounting with that same smug confidence as if nothing had happened. I caught up to her in the parking lot trying to keep my tone steady as I asked for a DNA test, just to clear everything up. Her smile wavered for a moment before she shrugged and said it wasn't necessary. Adam had told her everything. She trusted him. I pressed again, offering to cover the cost, to keep it private. She deflected with practiced ease. Said she didn't want to drag the baby into a legal mess, especially so soon after Adam's death. Then she walked away, leaving a trail of perfume and suspicion behind her. That night, I went back to Adam's closet. There was one coat he always wore on business trips, a wool trench with deep inside pockets. I'd gone through his things before, but something told me to check again. My fingers found something hard tucked into the lining, a small key. It didn't match anything in the house. Not the safe, not the filing cabinet. I drove to our bank the next morning and asked about safety deposit boxes. After showing my ID and Adam's death certificate, the clerk led me into a quiet room in the back. Inside the box was a plain envelope and a small flash drive. The envelope had my name written on the front in Adam's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter was dated 2 weeks before his death. He wrote that he'd made a terrible mistake, that Tessa had tricked him into a one-time thing during a business trip, that she had shown up later claiming to be pregnant, but the timeline didn't add up. He said she refused a test, demanded money, and threatened to ruin him if he didn't comply. He wrote that he didn't believe the baby was his, that he had started gathering evidence. He planned to go to the police, and that no matter what happened, he loved me. Only me. I read it twice, then a third time. The anger that had sat like a stone in my chest began to shift. Not into forgiveness, not yet, but into something softer. Grief laced with relief. Adam hadn't betrayed me. He had been trying to protect me, even when it cost him everything. I waited until everything was in place before reaching out. My lawyer, Sandra Klein, had reviewed the letter, the bank transfers, and the messages from the burner phone. She said we didn't have enough for criminal charges yet, but we had more than enough to push Tessa into a corner. I called Tessa and invited her over for a conversation. Calm, polite, almost friendly. She agreed without hesitation. That evening, the house was spotless. I set the dining room for 4. Sandra sat at one end, quiet but alert. Across from her, my mother-in-law, June, was stone-faced, arms, crossed eyes, cold with grief and fury. I sat at the head of the table, facing the door. When Tessa arrived, she looked surprised to see the others, but smiled like she wasn't the least bit threatened. She made small talk at first, complimenting the decor, mentioning how Adam always described the kitchen as cozy. I didn't indulge her. I poured a glass of water, placed it in front of her, and said we needed to talk about the will. Her smile widened, falsely sweet, as she reached into her bag and pulled it out again, like a prop in a magic show. Before she could speak, I slid a printed copy of the property deed across the table. One name. Mine. She blinked, but kept smiling. Said Adam had promised to add himself, that the will reflected his intentions. I nodded and handed her a second document. A statement from the county office. No will had been filed under Adam's name, ever. Her posture stiffened. I let the silence stretch just long enough and to make her shift in her chair. Then I slid the burner phone across the table. The texts, the threats, all laid bare. I watched her eyes scan the screen, searching for an angle. Her voice wavered for the first time as she asked where I got it. I didn't answer. Instead, I placed the final card down. Adam's letter. Signed. Handwritten. Detailed. The color drained from her face. She reached for the will again, as if tearing it in half might undo what had been said. I stopped her hand and calmly added one last item, a background report. 3 names. 3 states. 3 failed relationships that ended with legal settlements and contested estates. June spoke then, her voice sharp with pain. You preyed on my son. And now you want to claim his life like it was yours." Tessa looked around the room, eyes darting for an exit, for someone to save her. No one moved. Sandra leaned forward and said quietly that if she set foot on the property again, we'd file for trespassing. And if she continued to claim ownership, we'd open a case for fraud. Tessa stood jaw-clenched, hands trembling. She tried to regain her composure, mumbling something about calling her own attorney. I walked her to the door, opened it, and waited. She paused on the threshold, one last flicker of defiance in her eyes. "You think you've won," she whispered. I met her gaze unflinching. I didn't need to win. I just needed the truth. And now I had it. 2 days after our confrontation, a detective showed up at my door. He asked for the documents I had shared with my attorney and confirmed that a formal investigation into Tessa was now underway. I handed him everything, including the flash drive from the safety deposit box, the burner phone, and the background report Carlos had compiled. A week later, I got the call. Tessa had been arrested at a motel 3 towns over. She'd been trying to leave the state with the baby and a suitcase full of cash. When the police ran the child's prints through missing persons databases, they found a match. The baby wasn't Adam's. He wasn't even hers. His name was Micah. He had been abducted from a hospital in Colorado just over a year ago. His parents, a young couple devastated by the loss, flew in that night. I didn't meet them, but I watched from a distance when they were reunited with their son. It was the first time I'd cried without bitterness since Adam's funeral. The news spread fast. By the end of the week, nearly everyone at the office knew. People who had whispered behind my back now avoided eye contact or offered awkward apologies in the elevator. June, once cold and distant in her grief, came by with flowers and sat beside me on the couch without saying much. That silence felt healing. Tessa faced charges for kidnapping, identity theft, fraud, and attempted extortion. Her bail was denied. There would be a trial, but I no longer felt the need to be in control of every detail. The system, flawed as it was finally working in my favor. The weight that had been pressing down on my chest for weeks began to lift. I walked through my house and saw it differently. Not as the scene of betrayal, but as a place Adam had loved, a place he'd tried to protect. I was no longer ashamed. I was angry, yes. But mostly, I was clear. The truth was out. The lies had crumbled. And the woman who thought she could steal my life was now the one behind bars. Justice didn't always come swiftly. But when it arrived, it felt like breath after drowning. 3 months after Tessa's arrest, I sold the house. Not because I wanted to run from the memories, but because I needed a fresh start. The walls had held too much pain, too many echoes. I found a small cottage in Bainbridge, quiet and bright, surrounded by pine trees and foggy mornings that made me feel like I could breathe again. Moving didn't erase what happened. It didn't undo the betrayal or the grief, but it gave me space. Space to think, to feel, to stop bracing for the next blow. For the first time in a long while, I was waking up without fear. I planted lavender in the front yard and painted the kitchen yellow. I bought a new set of dishes and used them just for myself. These small things felt like declarations. I'm still here. I'm still whole. June visited often. Our relationship had shifted after the truth came out. She apologized for doubting me, for not defending me sooner. I didn't need the words, but I accepted them. She brought photos of Adam as a boy, and we laughed over stories I'd never heard before. Grief softened between us, no longer a sharp blade, but something we carried together. One morning over coffee, she asked if I'd thought about telling my story. I had, though I wasn't sure how. I didn't want pity or drama. But I did want people to understand how easily deception can slip into a life, how even love can blind us to danger. I started small. A blog post. Then a video, just me in my living room, speaking into the camera with nothing but honesty. I didn't dramatize or embellish. I told the truth. About Adam. About Tessa. About how the worst moment of my life taught me the value of clarity and the cost of silence. The response surprised me. Messages poured in from people who'd been manipulated, lied to, or even stalked by someone they once trusted. Women mostly. Smart, strong women who had been made to question their own instincts. I read every story. I replied to as many as I could, and I started to feel something I hadn't in months. Purpose. I began partnering with a nonprofit that supports victims of coercion and fraud. I spoke at events, lent my voice to campaigns about identity theft and emotional manipulation. It didn't erase what I'd lost, but it gave my pain somewhere to go. Healing didn't come in one sweeping moment. It came in waves. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, thinking I hear a knock at the door. Sometimes I miss Adam so much I forget to breathe. But I don't carry shame anymore. I carry truth. And truth, it turns out, is lighter than fear. I learned that closure isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing what we carry forward. I carry forward strength, not the loud, dramatic kind, quiet strength. The kind that says I know what I've survived. I know who I am now. And I won't apologize for either. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Tessa had never walked into that birthday party. If she had never spoken. Would I have kept living in the illusion, maybe? But then I think of Micah, safe in his parents' arms. I think of the women who messaged me saying my story gave them courage. And I realize that the storm, as cruel as it was, cleared the path for something better. I tell my story now, not because I want to relive it, but because I hope someone out there hears it at just the right time. Maybe someone is on the verge of ignoring their gut. Someone being told they're crazy or dramatic or paranoid. If that's you, trust yourself. Dig deeper. Ask the hard questions. You're not wrong to want answers. Because sometimes the truth sets you free. And sometimes it saves you.